The rain came down hard as Grace stood on the porch, holding her daughter Lucy close, while the door behind her slammed shut for the last time. Just an hour earlier, she had been a member of this family. Now she was nothing to them. Her husband, Edward, had died in a car accident only 10 days before, and his family wasted no time showing their true feelings. His mother, Margaret, had watched coldly as two men carried Grace's suitcases to the curb. There was no warmth left in her eyes, only relief that Grace was finally leaving. Grace had married into the Whitfield family 3 years ago, and from the very first day she felt like an outsider. Margaret never approved of her son's choice, calling Grace plain and unworthy of the family name. Edward had tried to shield her from his mother's sharp words, but after his passing, there was no one left to protect her. The family lawyer arrived within days, presenting papers that stripped Grace of everything: the house, the savings, even the small business she had helped Edward build. She signed because she had no strength left to fight, and because Lucy needed her mother calm, not broken. Standing in the rain now, Grace felt the weight of her new reality. She had $30 in her purse and a phone with a cracked screen. Lucy tugged at her coat, asking why grandmother was not coming to say goodbye. Grace had no answer that would not hurt her daughter, so she simply held her tighter and turned toward the street, walking away from the only home Lucy had ever known. As they walked, a black car parked quietly across the street caught Grace's attention. She could not see who was inside, only the outline of someone watching through the tinted window. She told herself it was nothing, perhaps a neighbor, perhaps a stranger waiting for someone else entirely. Still, an odd feeling settled over her, a sense that she was being observed for a reason she could not explain. They found a cheap motel a few blocks away, the kind with flickering lights and thin walls. Grace paid for one night, promising herself she would figure out the rest in the morning. Lucy fell asleep quickly, exhausted from the day, but Grace stayed awake, staring at the ceiling, replaying every unkind word Margaret had ever said to her. She wondered how her life had crumbled so completely in such a short time, and whether there was anyone left in the world who still cared what happened to her and her daughter. Just before midnight, her phone lit up with a message from a number she did not recognize. She almost ignored it, assuming it was a mistake or an advertisement, but something made her open it. The words on the screen were short, yet they sent a chill through her chest. She read them twice, then a third time, unable to understand who would send such a message, or why. Whatever was coming, she realized her quiet, painful exit from the Whitfield family was not the end of her story. It was only the beginning of something much larger, something she never could have imagined. Grace set the phone down, her hands trembling slightly, and looked over at Lucy sleeping peacefully beside her. Outside, the rain continued to fall, and somewhere in the city, someone already knew her name. The message stayed open on Grace's phone through the night. It read simply, "You were never supposed to be thrown away, someone is coming." She read it so many times the words blurred together, yet no explanation followed, no name, no number she could trace. She told herself it was a prank, perhaps a wrong number meant for someone else entirely, and eventually exhaustion pulled her into a restless sleep beside Lucy. Morning arrived with soft light through the thin motel curtains. Grace woke to a knock at the door, gentle but firm. She hesitated, checking through the peephole before opening it just a crack. No one stood outside. Instead, on the ground sat 2 bags of groceries, fresh bread, fruit, and milk, along with a small envelope tucked between them. She looked both directions down the hallway, but whoever had left them was already gone. Inside the envelope was a folded piece of paper and a stack of bills, more money than Grace had seen in months. There was no note explaining who sent it, only a small drawing in black ink, a single rose with thorns along its stem. Grace stared at the symbol, unsure why it felt familiar, yet certain she had seen something like it before, perhaps in old photographs from Edward's belongings, tucked away in boxes she was never allowed to open. She sat at the small motel table, sorting through the money and food while Lucy ate breakfast happily, unaware of her mother's racing thoughts. Grace began to wonder about Edward, about the late-night phone calls he used to take in another room, the business trips he never fully explained, the expensive watch he wore that seemed far too costly for his stated income. She had loved him deeply, yet she realized now there had always been parts of his life kept carefully hidden from her. Throughout the day, small things continued to arrive. A woman from housekeeping brought fresh towels without being asked. The motel manager quietly extended their stay for a full week, insisting there was no charge. Grace grew more confused with each kind gesture, unable to understand why strangers were suddenly so generous toward her and her daughter. She began to feel as though invisible hands were rearranging her circumstances, guiding her toward something she could not yet see. That evening, while Lucy drew pictures with new crayons someone had left at the front desk, Grace searched through an old box of Edward's belongings she had managed to keep. Beneath old letters and photographs, she found a small card with the same black rose symbol, along with a name she did not recognize, written in careful handwriting. Victor Kane. She whispered the name aloud, feeling its weight, though she had no idea who he truly was or what connection he held to her late husband. Her phone buzzed again, another message from the same unknown number. This one was different, shorter, almost like an announcement. Tomorrow, someone will come to explain everything. Please stay where you are and remain calm. Grace read the words several times, torn between fear and desperate curiosity. Whoever was reaching out clearly knew details about her life that she herself did not fully understand. And after everything she had endured, she found herself willing to face whatever truth awaited her, rather than remain in painful confusion any longer. She looked at Lucy, safe and unaware, and made a quiet decision to stay, to wait, and to finally learn who had been watching over them since the moment they were left out in the rain. The following afternoon, a sleek black car pulled up outside the motel, the same one Grace had noticed the night she was thrown out of the Whitfield house. She watched from the window as a tall man in a dark coat stepped out, moving with quiet confidence that made everyone nearby instinctively step aside. He walked directly to her door and knocked twice, calm and deliberate. Grace opened the door cautiously, and the man introduced himself simply as Victor Kane. His voice was steady, neither threatening nor overly friendly, just direct. He asked to speak with her privately, and though every instinct told her to be careful, something about his manner convinced her he meant no harm. She asked Lucy to stay inside watching cartoons while she stepped into the hallway with him. Victor explained that he had known Edward for many years, long before Grace had ever entered his life. Their families had old ties, connections built through business dealings that Edward rarely discussed openly. When Edward passed away, an old arrangement between their families activated, one that guaranteed protection for his wife and child, regardless of what his own family decided to do. Grace listened, stunned, as pieces of Edward's hidden life slowly came into focus. According to Victor, Edward had once helped his family during a difficult period, offering support that saved them from significant financial ruin. In return, Victor's family made a promise, one that transferred automatically to Edward's spouse should anything happen to him. Margaret and the rest of the Whitfield family, it seemed, either did not know about this arrangement or chose to ignore it entirely when they forced Grace out onto the street. Grace struggled to process everything, her mind racing between disbelief and quiet relief. She asked why no one had told her sooner, and Victor admitted that these arrangements were kept private, known only to select family members, meant to remain hidden unless absolutely necessary. Her removal from the Whitfield home had triggered the obligation, and from that moment, his family began quietly watching over her and Lucy. He explained that the gifts, the extended motel stay, the sudden kindness from strangers, all of it had been arranged discreetly on his instruction. Grace felt a strange mixture of gratitude and unease, unsure how to feel about being watched so closely without her knowledge. Still, she could not deny that his intervention had kept her and Lucy safe during their most vulnerable days. Victor assured her that his intentions were honorable, that he sought nothing from her in return beyond honoring the promise made years ago. He mentioned, briefly, that the Whitfield family would soon understand the seriousness of what they had done, though he offered no further details on what that meant exactly. Grace felt a flicker of something unfamiliar, not fear, but a growing sense that she was no longer entirely powerless. Before leaving, Victor handed her a card with a private number and told her to call if she needed anything at all. As his car pulled away, Grace stood in the hallway, replaying his words in her mind, aware that her life had just shifted onto a path far different from the one she had imagined only 2 days earlier. Word of Victor Kane's visit spread quickly through certain circles of the city, circles the Whitfield family had long depended on for their business success. Within days, Margaret began receiving strange phone calls, business partners suddenly hesitant, deals quietly falling through without clear explanation. She dismissed it at first as unrelated misfortune, refusing to consider that her treatment of Grace might carry any real consequence. Grace, meanwhile, settled into a modest apartment arranged through Victor's assistance, a safe space for her and Lucy to rebuild their routine. She enrolled Lucy back into school and began looking for steady work, determined to stand on her own despite the unexpected support surrounding her. Victor checked in occasionally, never overstepping, always respectful of the boundaries she set, which slowly eased her earlier uncertainty about his involvement. As weeks passed, the Whitfield family's situation grew increasingly difficult. Investors withdrew their support, longtime partners severed ties, and rumors circulated about questionable practices within their company, rumors that seemed to surface only after Grace's removal became widely known. Margaret grew desperate, eventually reaching out to Grace directly, requesting a meeting she would have refused only weeks earlier. Grace agreed to meet, choosing a quiet cafe rather than any location connected to the Whitfield family. Margaret arrived looking noticeably worn, her usual confidence replaced by visible strain. She admitted, reluctantly, that the family business was struggling, and asked whether Grace held any influence over the sudden shift in their fortunes. Grace remained calm, explaining honestly that she had asked for nothing against them, though she acknowledged that certain people had taken interest in how she had been treated. Margaret's expression shifted from confusion to slow realization as Grace mentioned Victor Kane's name. She recalled hearing about him years ago, someone Edward mentioned only once, in passing, during a conversation she had never taken seriously. Margaret understood now that dismissing Grace so carelessly had cost her family far more than she ever anticipated. Rather than seeking further hardship for the Whitfield family, Grace requested only fairness, the return of what rightfully belonged to Lucy as Edward's daughter, including a portion of the business he had helped build. Margaret, recognizing she had little choice remaining, agreed to Grace's terms, arranging for proper legal transfer of assets within the following weeks. Grace left the meeting feeling something she had not experienced in a long time, a quiet sense of closure. She did not seek revenge, nor did she wish continued suffering upon Margaret or the rest of the family. She simply wanted acknowledgement of the wrong done to her and Lucy, and a fair chance to rebuild their lives moving forward, free from the shadow of mistreatment that had defined her final days within that household. Months passed, and Grace's life gradually transformed into something steady and full of quiet promise. With the assets returned to Lucy's name, Grace used part of the funds to start a small business of her own, something she had once dreamed about but never had the courage to pursue. Victor occasionally offered guidance, connecting her with trustworthy people who helped her navigate contracts and early business decisions, always careful to let her make the final choices herself. Grace found unexpected fulfillment running her small shop, watching it grow through her own effort and determination. Lucy thrived as well, settling comfortably into her new school, making friends, and slowly healing from the confusion surrounding her father's passing. Grace made sure to shield her daughter from the more complicated details of their situation, allowing Lucy simply to enjoy her childhood without unnecessary worry. Over time, Grace and Victor's relationship evolved into a comfortable friendship built on mutual respect rather than obligation. He never pressured her into any deeper involvement with his world, respecting her wish to build an independent, honest life for herself and her daughter. Occasionally, he would stop by her shop, offering quiet encouragement or simply checking on how things were progressing, always careful to maintain appropriate distance. Grace often thought back to the night she stood in the rain, believing her life had reached its lowest point. She realized now that moment, painful as it was, had ultimately led her toward independence and strength she never knew she possessed. The Whitfield family's rejection, meant to break her, instead became the beginning of her own quiet transformation into someone capable, confident, and finally free. As her business gained a loyal following within the community, Grace began mentoring other women who had faced similarly difficult circumstances, offering guidance and support drawn from her own experience. She found deep purpose in helping others rebuild, understanding firsthand how quickly life could change, and how important it was to have someone believe in your ability to recover. One evening, standing at the entrance of her shop as she prepared to close for the day, Grace looked out at the street and noticed Victor's familiar car parked nearby. He gave a small nod through the window before driving away, a quiet gesture of continued respect rather than any lingering obligation. Grace smiled softly, grateful for how far she and Lucy had come. Her story, once defined by rejection and uncertainty, had become one of resilience and quiet triumph. Grace understood now that being cast aside did not mean being without value, and that sometimes the darkest moments carried within them the seeds of an entirely new beginning, one built on her own strength, patience, and unwavering love for her daughter.